You know that feeling? That hollow, gut punch realization that the person you built your entire life around has just decided you're a minor inconvenience? That was me, sitting across the polished mahogany table from my husband, Mark. Except my feeling was 100 times worse because Mark didn't just want a divorce, he wanted a divorce because he thought I was a financial lightweight who spent too much time on a job he assumed was barely paying the bills. He wanted a divorce without knowing that in my small, unimportant career, I was secretly earning $700,000 a year. It was a Tuesday night, not a dramatic Saturday fight. Just a quiet, sterile conversation in our perfectly modern minimalist dining room. A room, by the way, that my $700,000 had paid for, even though Mark thought his modest management salary covered the mortgage. Olivia, he started, clearing his throat, his posture rigid. We need to talk about the future, our future. I put down my fork carefully, not wanting to make a sound. I already knew what was coming. The arguments had been ramping up for months. Every time my phone buzzed late or I had to take a quick 10-minute call, Mark would sigh dramatically. Can't that wait, Liv? Is that small business of yours really that demanding? My small business was a tech consulting firm. I didn't just work there. I owned a significant equity stake. My annual income, which included salary, bonuses, and equity payouts, rounded up to $700,000. Mark thought I was a mid-level manager pulling in maybe $80,000 tops. I had actively cultivated this image of a moderately successful, but always busy wife. Why? Because early in our marriage, before the big money hit, Mark had made it clear he wanted to be the main breadwinner. He needed to feel like the protector, the provider. Any success I had, even moderate success, he treated as a personal challenge. So when the big money came, I kept it tucked away, a secret reserve, a giant, beautiful six-figure safety net. I told him my work was stable and demanding, but I never discussed figures. Look, Liv, he continued, leaning forward, trying to appear earnest, I love you. But I'm tired of feeling like I'm married to your laptop. You're always working. You're always stressed. We're never spontaneous. I want a wife who focuses on her life, who is present. Not someone chasing the next rung on a ladder that frankly isn't even that high. A ladder that isn't that high. The words stung not because they were true, but because his entire justification for leaving me was based on a lie I had allowed to fester. He thought I was sacrificing our marriage for a meager salary bump. Mark, I'm just trying to secure our future, I said, keeping my voice level. Inside, a cold realization was setting in. He didn't just dislike my work, he disliked the idea of me having my own success, even if it was small. He wanted someone whose life revolved around him. Our future is fine, Olivia, he scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. My job provides plenty. We don't need your extra $80,000 a year if it means losing us. And honestly, it feels like you prioritize your job over me, over us. $80,000. God, if he only knew. I could have bought his entire company, locked him in the parking lot, and still had enough left over to fund a small nation space program. But I didn't say any of that. The moment I saw the smug finality in his eyes, I decided to play the role he had assigned me. The focused but underpaid career woman who just lost her man. The thought of revealing the truth then, watching his face crumble, was tempting, but I knew the revenge would be so much sweeter if he fully committed to his choice first. I wanted him to burn his own bridges, believing he was walking toward a better life. If that's how you truly feel, Mark, then I won't stand in your way, I said, a wave of calm washing over me. It wasn't the calm of acceptance, it was the calm of a general looking at the battlefield, realizing the war was about to begin and she had all the secret artillery. I'll instruct my lawyer to draft the papers. He looked genuinely surprised. He probably expected tears, begging, and promises to quit my job. You're accepting this? If you want out because you think my job is holding you back, then yes. I accept it, I replied, standing up. I just hope you find the kind of presence you're looking for. His relief was palpable. He actually looked happier the moment I agreed to let him go. That's when I knew this wasn't just about my job. It was about someone else. And that someone else was my so-called best friend, Chloe. Chloe. The one who was always telling me, Liv, you work so hard, but for what? That money isn't worth losing, Mark. The one who was always available to cook Mark dinner or watch the game with him when I was stuck on a late call. The one who had Mark's full, undivided attention. The day I told Chloe Mark and I were divorcing, she put on an incredible show of shock and righteous anger on my behalf. How could he? After all you've done for him? He's such an idiot. But later that night I checked the transaction history on the joint credit card we hadn't canceled yet, the one I mostly paid for. Mark had bought an expensive bottle of champagne and 2 tickets to a private jazz club, all on the same day he asked for the divorce. And the purchase was made an hour before he dropped the news on me. He'd already started celebrating his freedom. I filed the divorce papers the next day. I let him keep his car and the small amount of savings he contributed. I took the house, which I had secretly paid off 2 years ago with a massive bonus, but I only claimed it was part of the settlement, letting him think his lawyer had fought hard. I wanted the divorce to be clean, swift, and entirely unremarkable from his perspective. He got his freedom from the overly ambitious, underpaid wife, and I got my massive 7-figure war chest and my dignity. Speaking of being busy, I want to know where my dedicated viewers are watching from. Drop a comment right now, tell me your city and what time it is while you're listening to this story. Let me know where the revenge is being heard. Mark moved out quickly barely 2 weeks later. He said he was going to stay with a colleague. I knew he was staying with Chloe. It was so transparent it was insulting. But I just smiled and wished him luck, knowing that every choice he made was digging a deeper hole for himself. He was rushing toward a finish line he thought was the end of a race, but it was really just the starting line of my highly anticipated revenge. He thought he was trading a dull, work-obsessed wife for a more attentive, fun-loving partner. He thought he was moving up. I just had to wait for him to fully commit to his new life before I pulled the rug out from under him. The bigger the pedestal he put Chloe on, the harder they would both fall. And I was going to be sitting on my $700,000 salary sipping champagne when they did. The waiting game was excruciating, but the anticipation of that moment was already the best kind of therapy. Every time I signed a new contract or closed a massive deal, I'd think, this is for the show. This is for the finale. The divorce was finalized 3 months after Mark walked out. 3 months. That should tell you everything you need to know about how eager he was to escape me and my supposed $80,000 income. He didn't even push back on the settlement. He was too busy enjoying the freedom that Chloe had so conveniently offered him. Let's rewind a bit to the beginning, to the detailed setup phase of this disaster. My marriage to Mark, which lasted 8 years, wasn't bad exactly. It was conventional. We met in college. He was handsome, ambitious in a safe corporate way, and he genuinely loved me at first. He worked in middle management for a manufacturing company. I was a rising star in tech consulting. The problem started about 4 years into the marriage. That's when my career really took off. I landed a few major contracts and my income skyrocketed from a respectable 6 figures to the $700,000 range. Mark's income, meanwhile, remained static, solid, dependable, but nowhere near mine. And he couldn't handle it. I remember one instance vividly. I had just closed a huge partnership deal and I was ecstatic. I bought him a ridiculously expensive watch, the kind he had been drooling over for years, as a surprise. When I presented it to him, instead of joy, I got this dark, sullen look. "What is this for, Liv?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. "It's a celebration. We did it. And I wanted you to have something nice," I said, beaming. He pushed the box back across the table. "I don't need you to buy me things, Olivia. I can buy my own watch. I don't need a handout from your job." It was devastating. He couldn't accept a gift that signaled my higher earning power. He saw it as charity, or worse, proof that I was better than him. That night, I made the conscious, regrettable decision to start minimizing my professional life. I started talking about my work as just another meeting or standard paperwork. I started banking the big bonuses in a separate account, transferring my salary to our joint account as if it were still just that moderate, respectable 6-figure sum we started with. I was maintaining the wife who earns less facade just to keep the peace, just to protect his fragile ego. It was a massive mistake, a slow-motion lie that eventually became the wrecking ball that destroyed my marriage. Enter Chloe. She wasn't just my best friend, she was my oldest friend, dating back to high school. She was a social worker, which is a noble but not highly lucrative profession. She always played the supportive, grounded friend, constantly reminding me to slow down and appreciate what you have with Mark. Looking back, every piece of advice she gave me was designed to push me away from my career and toward being the conventional wife Mark desired. Chloe and Mark got along disturbingly well. When I was on a business trip, Chloe would often stop by the house. "Just keeping Mark company so he isn't lonely," she'd say, always with that sweet, innocent smile. I remember thinking it was so kind of her. She'd bring over beer, they'd watch sports, and she'd listen intently while Mark vented about his boss, or worse, vented about me. One time I came home from a 4-day conference exhausted. Mark was nowhere to be found. I found a note, went to Chloe's. She offered to make dinner since you're busy. When I finally caught up with him later that night, I was hurt. Mark, I've been gone 4 days and you couldn't wait to see me? His response was chillingly dismissive. Chloe understands. She's domestic. She focuses on her life outside of work. You need to take a page out of her book, Liv. I miss having a wife who is just present. Chloe was the perfect foil. She was available. He baked. She didn't wear expensive suits or take international calls. She validated Mark's need to be the successful primary breadwinner because her own income was genuinely modest. I'm positive that the idea of leaving me didn't originate solely in Mark's head. Chloe had been gently planting seeds of discontent for months, if not years. She was the one who normalized his complaining about my success, framing it not as a problem with his ego, but as a problem with my priorities. The shift became undeniable right before the divorce announcement. I had just purchased a vintage convertible as a personal treat, paid for entirely from my hidden account, of course. I told Mark I got a great deal on a used car, and didn't mention the price tag. Chloe saw it first. She came over and her smile was brittle. Wow, Liv. That's a lot of car. Don't you think it's a bit much for someone just starting to build their retirement fund? She asked with a meaningful glance at Mark. Mark instantly jumped in. See, Olivia? Even Chloe thinks you're prioritizing flashy toys over our stability. I remember the sheer hypocrisy hitting me. Stability? My separate accounts held enough liquid assets to buy his stability 10 times over. I was the financial rock of that marriage, hidden beneath a thin veneer of mid-level manager. But I just smiled sweetly. Maybe you're right, Chloe. I guess I just got carried away. That interaction was the final confirmation. Chloe wasn't supporting me, she was actively undermining me in front of my husband. She was positioning herself as the sensible, grounded alternative to my reckless, workaholic self. She was painting a picture for Mark. A life where he was the respected man, the successful one, married to a woman who happily stayed in his shadow. And that's exactly what Mark wanted. He wanted validation that his choice to settle for a good enough life was the right one. He wanted a partner who required him, not one who could out-earn and outplan him. Chloe gave him that fantasy, wrapped up in a casserole dish and delivered with a knowing look. So, when he asked for the divorce, citing my focus on a job he believed was barely bringing in the cash, the irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. He wasn't leaving me for someone better. He was leaving me for the version of a wife he needed to feel superior. A wife who, he assumed, would always be on the lower rung of the financial ladder. He was choosing comfort over ambition, and I, knowing the full weight of my success, let him walk right into the trap. The trap I had unknowingly set years ago by prioritizing his ego over the truth. The immediate aftermath of the divorce was characterized by Mark's sheer arrogance and Chloe's performance of domestic bliss. And it all hinged on the core lie, the financial one. This is where the layered conflict really started to deepen, because I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal of marriage. I was dealing with a planned, calculated erosion of my character based on my supposed poverty. Mark had always been sensitive about money, but once he thought he was free, his disdain for my small income became almost aggressive. He was so convinced that my relentless work schedule was pointless because the payout was meager that he used it as the central pillar of his moral high ground. He called me a few weeks after the papers were signed, supposedly to discuss dividing up some old boxes, but really, it was just an excuse to gloat. So, Liv, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, I hope you're finally thinking about dialing it back, you know? Working fewer 60-hour weeks for that $80,000 grind? You seem miserable. It's just not worth it. I leaned back in my office chair, the one in my fully soundproofed customized home office that cost more than his entire annual salary, and smiled into the phone. I'm actually quite happy, Mark. Business is booming. We just secured a major international client. Oh, another international client that pays you peanuts, I'm sure, he scoffed. Look, Chloe and I were talking and she suggested maybe you should look into a job with a better work-life balance. Something that lets you use your skills without burning you out for such little return. Honestly, Liv, you're smart, You could easily get a relaxed gig making 65-70,000 and be happier. 65,000. The audacity was breathtaking. He and Chloe were actively pitying me, constructing a narrative where I was the poor, overworked fool who needed guidance from them, the sensible, financially stable couple. Chloe, the social worker, earning maybe $55,000, and Mark, the middle manager, earning maybe $110,000, were counseling the CEO of a successful firm earning $700,000 on how to manage her career better. It was truly hilarious, but I kept my cool. "That's very thoughtful of Chloe," I said dryly. "But I actually love my work. I enjoy the complexity even if it is demanding." "Well, you just keep grinding then," he replied, sounding genuinely smug. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Chloe and I, we prioritize balance. We're actually taking a spontaneous trip next month. Just a long weekend in the mountains. We can afford to take time off without worrying about missing a paycheck." I knew that trip was being paid for by the settlement money he got from the divorce. Money that came from my equity in the house. He was essentially funding his romantic getaway with the woman he betrayed me with, using the money he took from the wife he was lecturing about financial responsibility. Meanwhile, Chloe was stepping into the role of my replacement with gusto. She changed her social media status to "in a relationship" the day the divorce was final. Then came the barrage of carefully curated photos. Chloe baking Mark his favorite cookies. Chloe and Mark casually renovating Mark's, now their cramped, rented apartment. Chloe wearing my old sweaters because she was borrowing Mark's things. Every post was a subtle dig, a public declaration that she was the domestic goddess I could never be, the one who put Mark first. The secondary challenge here was the social dilemma. All our mutual friends who knew nothing of my actual financial status started talking. They saw the divorce as Mark leaving the workaholic for the grounded, attentive friend. They'd call me, cautiously offering support. "Liv, are you okay? It sounds like Mark just really needed someone less focused on the corporate grind," one friend whispered sympathetically. I never corrected them. I just let the lie stand. Why? Because every ounce of pity, every quiet assumption about my professional failure, was strengthening the foundation of my revenge. The longer Mark and Chloe believed their superiority was justified by my financial inadequacy, the more devastating the truth would be. The tension was rising exponentially because Mark started pushing for marriage quickly. He told me during one awkward furniture pickup that they wanted to get married in 4 months. "We don't see the point in waiting, Liv. We know what we want. We're on the same page about life priorities. Focusing on us." The irony was reaching critical mass. He was rushing into a second marriage with a woman who had helped him discard his first, all while believing he was the financially superior partner. And I knew the exact date and location of their small, intimate wedding, a wedding that was being financed almost entirely by the settlement check I gave him. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Dana, was the only person who knew the full story. She tried to convince me to push back, to reveal my earnings and take Mark for everything. "Olivia, you are leaving 7 figures on the table just to satisfy some bizarre need for theatrical revenge," Dana argued, shaking her head. "It's not bizarre, Dana. It's necessary," I countered. "Mark didn't just leave me, he invalidated my ambition and my worth, all while sleeping with my best friend. He chose to build his happiness on a lie he created about me. I want him to experience the full, catastrophic consequences of that choice. The lie has to stand until the moment he is permanently bound to Chloe." I was waiting for the perfect moment, the moment of maximum commitment and maximum exposure. The wedding was fast approaching, and I knew that the moment they exchanged vows, the clock would start ticking faster. I had one final crucial piece of information I needed to secure my endgame, and that involved knowing the details of their financial agreement. I had a feeling Mark, secure in the knowledge that he was the big earner, would make certain assumptions about protecting his assets. Assumptions that would later destroy him. I continued to work harder than ever, though I made sure no one could trace my success. I bought a new luxurious apartment downtown, paid for in cash, and started an elaborate covert investment plan. My life was thriving even as I played the role of the quiet, recovering divorcee. I was building a fortress of financial security, while Mark and Chloe were building a sandcastle of lies. The storm was coming, and they had no idea they were standing right in the path of a $700,000 tidal wave. The speed at which Mark and Chloe transitioned from secret affair to public engagement to imminent marriage was breathtaking. It was a clear sign that they were both desperate to validate their choices. Mark wanted to solidify his status as the primary provider married to the woman who appreciated him, and Chloe wanted to lock down the relatively stable income he represented, convinced she was getting the better deal compared to her overworked, underpaid friend. The wedding was set for October, 4 months after the divorce was final. It was a small, intimate affair at a vineyard outside the city. I heard about all the details through our mutual social circles and occasionally from Mark himself, who still seemed to feel the need to check in and justify his happiness. "It's going to be low-key, Liv," he said in one call, sounding overly relaxed. "We're keeping it simple. Chloe doesn't need all the flashy stuff. She's focused on the marriage, not the spectacle. Unlike some people. That was the constant subtext. He was praising Chloe by subtly diminishing me, referencing the expensive things he believed I purchased on an inadequate salary. It was infuriating, but I just absorbed it, letting the insults build my resolve. I chose to observe this period from a distance, like watching a poorly written play where I knew the tragic ending. I didn't reach out to their guests, and I certainly didn't attend. My silence was the most powerful tool I possessed. It allowed them to operate in a vacuum of false security. They assumed I was wounded, financially recovering and licking my wounds. They believed I was neutralized. Mark's new lifestyle was entirely predicated on the belief that he was the success story and I was the cautionary tale. They moved into a slightly nicer apartment, still rented, still far inferior to the house I was still occupying, and every purchase was framed as an achievement. Chloe would post pictures of their new modest furniture with captions like, "Building our future one sensible piece at a time. So grateful for my amazing grounded man." Grounded. He was grounded, all right. Grounded in a financial reality that was about to shatter his world. The wedding day came and went. I intentionally scheduled a major board meeting that day, signing documents worth millions. I celebrated their union by increasing my net worth. That evening, I allowed myself a single glass of expensive champagne and scrolled through the few public photos posted. Mark looked ecstatic, truly believing he had achieved the optimal outcome. Love, validation, and freedom from an ambitious woman. Chloe looked smug, radiating that "I won and got the guy" energy. They looked like a couple who had successfully navigated a complex love triangle, unaware that the third person was not merely a victim, but a sleeping financial giant. This is the turning point and rising drama section, and the true turning point was actually a calculated action I took before the wedding, which would only reveal its purpose afterward. My lawyer, Dana, had a very specific, discreet request for Mark's company's legal team during the divorce proceedings. A request that seemed innocuous at the time. I asked for a non-compete clause, stating I wouldn't work in Mark's industry for 5 years, in exchange for a slightly larger payout of my equity in the house. This was a complete bluff. I had no intention of ever working in his dull industry. But the maneuver achieved 2 crucial things. 1, it solidified the idea that I was trying to financially recover from a career setback, and 2, it gave Dana access to Mark's company's lawyer. During this post-wedding period, Dana subtly reached out to Mark's former divorce lawyer, the company's lawyer who had also drawn up their basic prenuptial agreement. Mark, convinced that Chloe was the non-earner, had insisted on a prenup. Dana, under the guise of tying up loose ends from the previous settlement, managed to get the critical details of Mark and Chloe's prenup. The prenup stipulated a very standard split of assets and future earnings, but it had one crucial Mark-driven clause. In case of divorce, if one party had demonstrably concealed a major financial asset or income source exceeding $100,000 annually, the concealing party would forfeit all rights to community property and pay the non-concealing party a penalty equal to 50% of the concealed amount. Mark put that clause in there, believing it would protect him from Chloe, assuming that she might try to hide some minor savings or a small investment. He was setting a trap, unaware that the trap was perfectly designed for the much, much larger secret I was holding. He was so confident in his status as the higher earner that he thought this clause would only ever apply to a lower-earning spouse trying to screw him over. This knowledge was the dramatic fuel I needed. They were married. The commitment was finalized. Mark had put a legally binding, self-destructive mechanism into place. The stage was set. My revenge was no longer about hurting his feelings. It was about financially disabling the life he chose, using the legal framework he put in place to protect his ego. I just needed the right moment to drop the bomb. A moment that ensured maximum shock and zero possibility of retreat for either of them. The clock was ticking and the moment was coming very, very soon. I was no longer the wounded ex-wife. I was the unseen orchestrator, waiting for the perfect beat drop. The moment arrived 3 weeks after Mark and Chloe's honeymoon. And oh boy was it spectacular. I didn't have to orchestrate a complicated public spectacle. Mark, in his staggering lack of self-awareness, walked straight into the kill zone. My company was finalizing a massive merger that involved buying out a smaller regional competitor. This competitor happened to be a key supplier for the manufacturing firm Mark worked for. As the CEO and equity holder of my firm, I was handling the final due diligence and signing off on the transition plan. The merger was huge, complex, and highly confidential. Mark, in his role as middle management, was tasked with attending a transition meeting at the supplier's headquarters, the very company my firm was acquiring. He didn't know who was buying them. He only knew the buyout was causing chaos for his supply chain. I was scheduled to make a surprise appearance at the supplier's headquarters to close the deal and reassure key stakeholders, including major clients like Mark's company. My staff ensured my visit was kept secret until the very last minute to prevent leaks and panic. On that fateful Thursday morning, I walked into the main boardroom of the newly acquired firm. The room was packed with executives, lawyers, and key managers from the companies reliant on the supplier. And sitting right at the main table, looking stressed and rumpled in his ill-fitting corporate suit, was Mark. I had dressed for success. A bespoke suit, understated but clearly expensive jewelry, and the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you're about to sign a multi-million-dollar contract. I was introduced by the head of the supplier company with reverential respect. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Olivia Hayes, the founder and CEO of Apex Solutions, and the visionary behind this acquisition. The entire room applauded, except for Mark. I watched as Mark's face went through an entire cycle of human emotion in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, and then pure, icy horror. He didn't recognize the name of my new rebranded firm, Apex Solutions, but he recognized me. His ex-wife, the one he divorced because she focused too much on her small job, was being introduced as the CEO and visionary buyer. He slowly rose from his seat, his hand shaking, knocking over his water glass. "Olivia? What are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice cracking. I looked at him, gave a slight, polite nod, and addressed the room as if he were just another face. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I understand there are concerns about the supply chain integration," I began, my voice clear and authoritative, completely ignoring Mark's question. Mark interrupted, completely losing his corporate composure. "No, wait. You work for a small consulting firm. 80,000 a year. What is Apex Solutions?" I paused, turning to face him fully, my expression one of practiced, cool professionalism. The entire room went silent. Everyone looked at Mark, then at me. "Mr. Simmons," I said, using his last name, which seemed to snap him out of his hysteria momentarily. "I founded Apex Solutions 6 years ago. We are a premier tech consulting and acquisition firm. I am the majority equity holder and CEO." I glanced pointedly at his company's executive seated next to him. "Our acquisition of your key supplier is a strategic move, ensuring better integration and service for our clients, including yours." Then came the hammer blow, the financial one delivered with surgical precision. "And to address your oddly specific question, Mark," I continued, making sure my voice carried across the silent room, "my personal income, which includes my executive salary, bonuses, and equity payouts from Apex, has comfortably exceeded $700,000 annually for the past 4 years. The $80,000 figure was the modest amount I chose to deposit into our joint account to maintain the financial arrangement you preferred during our marriage." The gasp that went through the room was audible. The shock on Mark's face was total. His jaw hung open, his eyes wide. He looked like a man who had just realized he had traded a winning lottery ticket for a stale biscuit. I didn't let him recover. I was on a high-stakes business presentation after all. "Now, if we could move past personal matters, which I assure you are fully resolved," I said, addressing the room, "let's discuss the immediate transition plan." Mark didn't move. He sat down heavily, staring blankly ahead. He was no longer thinking about supply chains. He was recalculating his entire life, his entire divorce, and every single cruel remark he had made about my career. But the ultimate twist came later that day. Mark was so rattled that he left the meeting early. He called me later, sputtering, his voice alternating between rage and panicked pleading. "You lied to me. You kept this a secret for years. You let me leave you for $80,000. "You didn't leave me for $80,000, Mark," I corrected him calmly. "You left me because you couldn't stand the idea of your wife being more successful than you, and you jumped at the chance to feel superior with Chloe. I simply let you choose the path you wanted, unburdened by the truth." Then I casually dropped the next bomb, the one that tied the financial truth directly to his new marriage. "You know, Mark, I spoke with Dana recently, just catching up on paperwork. She mentioned your prenup with Chloe. That clause about concealed income over $100,000? That was a very interesting addition. A smart move to protect your substantial income, I suppose." Silence. Dead silence. He had completely forgotten about the penalty clause designed to protect him from Chloe's hypothetical deception. He had signed it just weeks ago, believing he was the only one who had anything substantial to protect. "Wait, Liv, why are you mentioning the prenup?" "Well, Mark, now that your wife, Chloe, the woman who encouraged you to leave me over my paltry salary, is fully aware, or soon will be, that you divorced a woman who earns $700,000 a year, how do you think that changes her perception of your value? And more importantly," I paused, letting the silence scream, "how does your concealment of my seven-figure income during the divorce proceedings, an income that was community property and was transferred into my sole ownership company equity during our marriage, affect your new prenup? After all, you told everyone, including your company's executives, that my income was negligible. That's a massive concealment of a highly relevant financial fact." He started hyperventilating. He was trapped. He concealed my income during the divorce settlement to appear the wealthier party, and by doing so he made a false declaration of his former marital assets, which was the foundation of his agreement with Chloe. His betrayal of me was about to become a legal liability against his new wife, orchestrated by the one person he thought was financially irrelevant. The silence on the phone stretched for so long I thought Mark had hung up, but then I heard a ragged, strangled noise, the sound of his perfectly constructed reality collapsing around him. "You wouldn't," he finally choked out. "You wouldn't involve Chloe in this. That's cruel, Liv." "Cruel?" I almost laughed. "Mark, you and Chloe spent months systematically dismantling my marriage, encouraging me to diminish my career and judging me for my ambition, all based on a fabricated financial narrative. You then married her within months, using the settlement money from the woman you betrayed, and put a clause in your prenup specifically designed to protect your assets from a spouse who conceals wealth. You built this trap, Mark. I'm just watching you step into it." This was the moment of full revelation. The climax wasn't just Mark knowing the truth. It was Chloe knowing the truth and realizing the scale of what they had lost. I knew Mark would inevitably tell Chloe, or she would find out through the sheer volume of gossip that was about to circulate through his office and the broader social circle. I didn't need to call her. The revenge plan had three core elements, and I was about to execute the final one. The financial fallout, the social fallout, and the emotional collapse. The financial tally. The day after the merger announcement, Mark's company's executive team started asking questions. My company, Apex Solutions, was now a critical player in their supply chain, and they suddenly realized their middle manager had divorced the CEO. The optics were terrible. They questioned why Mark had misrepresented my financial situation during the divorce, which raised serious flags about his judgment and honesty. Within the week, Mark was put on administrative leave pending a review of professional conduct and judgment. His stable income, the foundation of his confidence, was instantly gone. Then came Chloe. Mark confessed everything, perhaps hoping for sympathy. He told her I earned $700,000, that he divorced me over a lie, and that he put the self-destruct clause in the prenup. Chloe's reaction was not one of support. She wasn't angry about the betrayal of friendship. She was furious about the betrayal of opportunity. She had traded a relatively stable, though modest, life with a decent job for a hasty marriage with a man who was now unemployed and had potentially forfeited any claim to the massive wealth he walked away from. Chloe called me not to apologize but to scream. "You manipulative snake. You let me think you were struggling. You let us make a fool of ourselves." You made a fool of yourselves, Chloe, by prioritizing money and convenience over loyalty and honesty, I replied, my voice stone cold. You didn't want my friendship. You wanted my husband. You didn't want Mark. You wanted the primary breadwinner status he represented. Guess what? He forfeited the one who was the real breadwinner, and now he's lost his job too. I then had my lawyer, Dana, send a carefully worded letter to both Mark and Chloe, citing the prenup clause. The letter stated that Mark's knowing misrepresentation of the marital estate during his divorce from me, and his subsequent concealment of that massive financial reality from Chloe, triggered the concealed income clause in their prenup. The penalty, 50% of the concealed amount, a figure that now referenced my $700,000 annual earnings and the equity he forfeited. It turned their prenup into a legal nightmare where they would be fighting over the loss of an income he chose to walk away from. The legal battle would cost them a fortune and drag out for years, ensuring their marital bliss was immediately poisoned by financial devastation. The emotional collapse. I ran into Mark one last time completely by accident 6 months later. I was leaving a high-end restaurant after a client dinner. He was working as a delivery driver, trying to make ends meet while his legal issues with Chloe and his former employer dragged on. He saw me step into a black car and came running up to the window, knocking frantically. I rolled it down just enough to hear him. He looked wrecked, tired, bitter, and defeated. Olivia, please. This isn't what I wanted. I messed up. Can we just go back? I can't live like this. I met his gaze, showing zero emotion. Go back where, Mark? To a marriage built on you need to feel superior? To a life where I had to hide my success so your ego could thrive? That life never existed, it was just the illusion I maintained for your benefit. Now the illusion is gone. I leaned forward. You said you didn't want a wife who focused too much on her job. I gave you the divorce you asked for and I kept my secret. You married the woman who convinced you to leave me and you found out my salary right after. You got exactly what you chose. The difference is my job is now booming and yours is over. Chloe is suing you and I am free. That's not revenge, Mark. That's the consequence of prioritizing pride over partnership. I signaled the driver. As the window went up, the last thing I saw was his face, not angry but utterly broken by the realization that he had willingly discarded $700,000 a year for a lie, and that his best friend had helped him do it, only to abandon him when the lie backfired. The final tally. My life is better, simpler, and exponentially wealthier without the weight of his fragile ego and Chloe's manipulation. They are tangled in a toxic, legally and financially ruinous marriage, constantly fighting over the ghost of the wealth Mark walked away from. I realized I didn't need to actively plot against them. I just needed to let them choose the wrong path, and then reveal the consequences of their choice when they were the most committed. The $700,000 secret was the ultimate weapon, and their belief in my failure was the ultimate betrayal. And that, my friends, is the tale of how I lost a husband and a best friend, only to gain true freedom and 8-figure net worth, and the satisfaction of watching karma deliver the most expensive lesson of their lives. If you loved this story and the sweet taste of this financial revenge, make sure to drop a comment and tell me what Mark and Chloe's next mistake should be. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more long-form viral tales.